My keyboard's getting kind of ratty where your hands rest. There's 10 screws along the bottom that you can undo that'll just release your pad, or 2 pads, so that you can do what you got to do to them. Here you can see that the pads pop right off after the screws are removed. If you start peeling from the bottom, you can peel off the sticky part. The next step is to separate the pad from the plastic piece you removed. Here you can see where we just loosened up all around the edge on the back. Now that we have it apart, we can start gently removing the foam from the backing of the fabric that's falling apart. I'm using a ruler here to hold down the foam while I gently pull back on the fabric to keep the foam from falling apart so easy and getting stuck on the back of the fabric. Now I have all the pieces and I'm ready to start doing some cutting out some patterns. Here I've taped a piece of craft paper and I'm going to just trace around the foam so I can get the exact size. Here you can see where I've cut out a little template I can use later. To make a template of the fabric that I'm pulling off, I want to flatten it as flat as I can, so I use a low setting on my Cricut press. You can use an iron and flatten everything out between butcher paper. And I want to do this for both of the small and the larger pieces. You just have to make sure that you have everything flattened out so that you have a good size template to use, and it'll make it nice and flat between the butcher paper. Just make sure all the edges are flattened out. There's a little bit of tackiness to it, so I can lay it flat on the craft paper before I start tracing the template for it. Here I'm tracing around the larger one so I can get a good template going. It's like magic! I have a template to cut out. My craft paper was really rolled up and wouldn't lay flat, so I am going to iron it with my Cricut press and just leave it on a little bit, and voila, it turns flat. Here I place my fabric good side down, flip my template so the front is down, and then I'll just trace everything. Once I trace everything, cut them out, then I'll be able to use the hot glue gun around the edges to glue it to the small pieces that they need to be glued to for the keyboard. Okay, I've come outside because I'm going to use my spray adhesive to put a tiny bit of tackiness on the back of the foam and stick it right back to the plastic part. So I'm gonna just shake it up really good and then spray it and then put it on there. And that'll help keep it still while I'm putting the fabric on. Okay, just took a couple of little shots and put it on there, and now you can see it's not going to come off or be loose when I'm trying to put my fabric around it, and it won't bunch up under there later. So now I'm just going to do the same thing with this. And I'll just put it on there and flip it over and just make sure it's below that groove. It'll sit down below that groove, but it can fold over the edge here a little bit. But this is the part that goes up to the keyboard, so you want to make sure that when you put it on there that it's up snug against the that curve and doesn't go over it, or there'll be a little bit of a bump in your keyboard where this goes back into the keyboard. Okay, so I've got it on there, and I didn't stretch it, I didn't think, but for some reason I have a little left over, so when the adhesive dries, I'm just going to trim that little bit off. But otherwise, it's still better than what it was. So here I'm going to use my hot glue gun and try to do a very thin layer around the edges and slowly but surely tack it around the edges on the bottom. So I've just got it turned upside down right now. Okay, so I'm starting with tacking it there a little bit, tacking it here and here, and then I'll tack it there just so it doesn't start shifting around when I'm trying to do the glue gun. Okay, have it all glued around the edges. Worked pretty good. Don't be afraid to stretch it and pull it out a little bit. That's what it looks like on the top. Kind of funky, but it'll work. So starting on the next one, You want to make sure that you've got everything kind of even, so when you pull up the fabric, you'll have enough to meet this little ridge right here. Alrighty, they're both done now, so I'm going to put them back on the keyboard. Well, there it is. My psychedelic padding for my keyboard.